Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the second research data management session. Today's one is actually going to be an interesting one. I don't think you've ever attended a session like this before. So it's going to be a bit of a blended session that actually incorporates a bit of gamification of research data management. So we'll be going through the concepts of introducing, or at least I'll be trying to introduce you to the concepts of research data management planning, and by actually gamifying that. And I'll start with just an outline of what this presentation will actually cover, at least what this session will cover, with the focus being on the RDM adventure game. But before that, I will actually try to give you a bit of information, some background information about how the game works, the game mechanics. That's very important to actually understand. This is an outline of what we'll be covering today. So I'll give you just a bit of an introduction about what we're going to do today. Then we'll actually skip point number 2. We'll go to a short presentation about the game, and then I'll show you a short demonstration about the research data management adventure game. So attendees will actually then be able to play the very first level. The game has 5 levels, but the one on data management planning is actually only the very first level. And then after that, then there's going to be a consultation, simulated consultation, and then you get to play the game a second time to see if you actually get different types of results. And then importantly, we'll record the results that you get. So the game scores you in terms of a percentage mark. But if you play only one level, then the mark is out of 20. The idea is to capture both of those scores to see whether you've actually improved or whether your score has actually declined. So just for the benefit of those who just walked in right now, this session is a blended session that will incorporate aspects of gamification. So we will be playing aspects of a certain level of a game. It's a serious game, so not a 3-dimensional immersive environment. It's not for entertainment purposes, it's for educational purposes. So just a bit of background, the game was actually designed by the University of Bath and the University of Stellenbosch, and was launched in the year 2020 in December, if I remember correctly. At that time when it was developed, there weren't too many games on RDM itself. So the idea was to create a game which can actually teach researchers, early career researchers, and students the core principles of research data management. Now, the game covers some things that you may have been exposed to yesterday, briefly, such as gathering of data, working with data, sharing the data eventually, how the data are archived, and perhaps most importantly, what we'll be looking at today, the data management planning aspect. Now, if you were to look at the game from a broad overview, what you'll see is what we'll look at today. On the left-hand side, that is data management planning, how someone writes a data management plan, and then how data management plans are actually reviewed by funders. And then there are other aspects of the games which are actually covered by the different stages. And these literally follow the research data management lifecycle that we went through yesterday. So how you design your study, how you organize your files and store your data, how you analyze and document your data, how the data are archived and eventually published. But due to time constraints, we won't be playing all of the levels today. But you're free to do so in your own time, having been introduced to the game. So the game itself, at a face value, it might not be very apparent. It just looks like a game. But at the core basis, what it covers is data management planning, data literacy, introducing people to different aspects of research data management, and data archiving. So it's more than just a game. You go through different levels and it follows a storyline, in which case, at each point, you're presented with a task and you're presented with certain challenges. And from those challenges, you make decisions and you're either awarded certain points or you lose points. That's how you actually accumulate points. And that's the score that I was referring to that we're interested in finding out about. You won't have to disclose the score publicly or anything like that. Now, the design of the game is based on choose your own adventure games. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with choose your own adventure books or choose your own adventure stories. These are like novels that were popular a few decades ago where you actually read a book, but it doesn't follow a chronological sequence, let's say going from page 1 to page 300. You'll hop around, you go from page 1 to 2, 3, 4, then you skip to page 30, and then based on the options that you're given, you make a decision. Do you want to go to page 15 to carry on, or do you want to find out something new by going to page 235? So you hop around, but eventually you come to the end, but there are different possible endings based on the decisions that you make. And this basically replicates what happens in real life in a research project. You have the opportunity to make different choices, and you don't always have the same outcomes. You can have a positive outcome, you can have a negative outcome. And the degree to which the decisions vary in terms of how positive or negative they are actually varies as well. So what you see here is something that resembles it's a sequence diagram. And that basically shows you that based on the decisions that you make in the game, you will either progress, and in some cases, you'll actually hit dead ends. Whereas in some cases, you'll proceed all the way to the end, but you can see that there's more than one possible ending here. The game actually has about 8 possible endings, just so that I can let you in on a bit of a secret there. But for the first level itself, there are probably less than 8 possible endings. But the score that you get will give you some feedback that will let you know how well you performed in the game itself. And the game is excellent for postgraduate students as well as early career researchers. But I've seen seasoned researchers who actually saw the value in playing a game of this nature. So how can the game itself be used? It can be used for virtual training sessions as well as interactive training. It can be used for synchronous as well as asynchronous purposes, which is why I mentioned that you're free to go and play the game on your own. It takes about 1 hour in order to play the full game. So one level should probably take about 10 to 15 minutes on average. This is what the landing page of the game looks like, and we'll actually dive into that. You can log in, obviously, online, and you'll be able to access the game yourself. It's freely accessible on the internet. And it's a text-based game, so no 3D, no three-dimensional immersive environment. It's a serious game, meaning that it's supposed to be an educational tool, more so than an entertainment tool. And it's supposed to resemble the books that it's based on, the Choose Your Own Adventure books. So it's got 5 levels: applying for funding, starting your work on a project, organizing your data files, describing your data, and publishing your work. But there's more than meets the eye when you actually just look at the titles of these levels. And then when you actually come to the end of each specific level, what you see is your scores actually indicated. And there's usually an icon, so that indicates that you've come to the end. And you'll see that there's a progress bar at the bottom that shows you how far you are in the game, and your score is listed at the very bottom there, as well as your ranking. So when you play the game and you get to an icon that looks like that, take note of that score. You can write it down somewhere or take a screenshot of that, because we'll play the game twice and you'll need both of those scores at the end. Now, just a few more things about the game. The game itself has actually been endorsed by several reputable institutions, such as the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud in Europe. Open Plato has also endorsed the game, and they have it on their website. It's been endorsed by 4TU Research Data, which is a consortium in Holland of the Netherlands, of a few higher education institutions. And you can see the Research Data Management Adventure game down there at the bottom. It's also been endorsed by the Wellcome Trust in terms of the Wellcome Open Research Fund. And what they've done is they've added a link to the game on the basis that they believe that anyone applying for funding through the Wellcome Trust would benefit greatly if they actually played the game first before they actually apply for funding. And it's also been endorsed by the Open Research Funders Group, which is a consortium that has several prominent members, such as the Wellcome Trust, the Templeton World Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and several other prominent funders that you see on the screen there. The game has been played by, my sources are correct, more than 4,000 people in the world now, the bulk of which are actually, both of whom are in South Africa. At least over 1,200 people have played. So you'll probably just add on to the numbers we're playing today, but there are a lot of people who've benefited by playing this game. And if anyone is interested in accessing the source code, those are the links right there, and a link to the game as well. And with that being stated, what we'll do now is we'll go to the game itself. So what you can do from your screens is you can simply go online to Google or whatever browser that you're using, and you can just type in RDM Adventure Game. what you should be looking for is the fourth link, the GitLab link. So the game is actually hosted on GitLab. So if you click that, or perhaps let's go back, not this one, the one beneath it, the one with the icon, the fifth link, my apologies. If you click that link, it will take you to the game rather than the source code. Okay, so before we start playing, what you can just watch for the moment. What I'll do is I'll take you through the actual guide that's built into the game. We'll just select one of these, qualitative or experimental. And what we'll do is we'll go through the guide and I'll explain how the game mechanics actually work. So I'll select yes, please, in this case. And the way that the game works is that it presents you with certain text, and you have several different ways of making certain decisions. So for instance, in this particular case, you can cycle through certain options. So you can click this one here. It says, click me to see the second option. If you click that, it shows you a third option. If you click it again, it shows you the first option. These are some of the examples of the kinds of options you'll see in the game. So you have to click your way through to cycle through the options. Or if you stayed on the same page whilst making that decision, there'll be a further link down the page that fixes your choices. So if you click that link, then you'll be directed to another page. So if you click that, you go to see you selected the third page. Now, the third option. So notice that if you would have selected a different option, like the third one, and then you went to the next page, it will show you which option you went for, and will present you with new options based on your choice. So in this particular example, it says that you may come across links that reveal extra text when you select them. And there's an example of one of those. If you click on it, what you'll find is that the text actually expands, and you can actually read a bit more information that was actually invisible initially. Now, in this example here, which also resembles what you see in the game, you're asked to create a sandwich. Now, that's not what you will be doing in the game. This is just for illustrative purposes. So you can actually take any of these options or leave some of them, just so that you can actually design a sandwich. And then you can click this link here to move on. And in that case, the game acknowledges that you selected a ham sandwich, vegan, apple. Those are the options. So it obviously stores the data, the information that you've actually selected based on the options that were presented to you. And then there's another set of questions that you see with options such as that ask you, or you're prompted to look out of a certain window, whether it's a round window, a square window, or a triangular window. And based on the option that you pick, it then describes that, well, in this case, you see a geodesic dome. If you look out a square window, you see a tower block. If you looked out of a triangular window, you would see a pyramid. So the key thing is that you start seeing that there are different types of questions that are presented to you. It's not usually the same types of questions, but there are different types of options, and the manner in which the options are presented differ. And ultimately, you get a score that is actually showcased. Usually, it shows up at the very bottom. You can see it, and you can track your score. Obviously, since this is just the example, you won't actually see anything. But you can resume playing by going back here, and then you can say, this is a bit too long for this page, and you basically want to restart. Now, the last two things that I want to point out for demonstration purposes is that there are some terms that might require a bit of defining. So if terms have been defined, what you'll find is that they are actually underlined. In this case, the term Jabberwock has been underlined, and if you click on that term, you'll actually see the definition of that term. So that is something that you see several times in the game itself for terms that have been defined. And this leads you now to the very last decision that you need to make before you start the game. That is, you actually get to pick which level you want to start from. You don't have to start from the very first level. You can start from any level. The game can be played individually or in groups. So in this case, we will start with the very first level, and that is all that we're actually going to play. If you start from the beginning and you play to the end, the decisions that you make will actually be stored. If you start from level 5 or level 4, the game gives you the options of making certain decisions. So there'll be assumptions that would be made about the choices you would have made had you played levels 1 to level 3, and then you just proceed from there onwards. So with that having been stated, you can actually log in to the game. and you can actually start playing the game. So in this case, you play the game on your own, given 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and we just basically wait until you're actually finished. So it's a learn by doing, and then from there on, we'll proceed with the rest of the session. Are there any questions or about this? Was that straightforward? Any questions from anyone attending online?
Yes, Prof. Just a quick one, just to correct me if I'm wrong. You said we can choose any, like, say I could choose option 2, starting working on your project, or do I have
No.
to
In this case, we're only going to play applying for funding. So we're
applying?
all
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's level 1 today. But in your own
Okay.
time, you could go play the rest. But for this session, since it's on data management planning, we're playing the data management planning stage, which is applying for funding.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm looking at the clock now. At 3 o'clock, then we can start playing. Jump back into the rest of the session. Just confirmation, Electra, are you indicating that you are finished with the level, or do you have a question?
I don't know how far I've gone, but I'm now
Did you
labeling
go?
files and all that. Is that, have I gone through the level, or I'm still during.
You've gone past, yeah. If you went past an icon looking like something like what you see there, then you've gone past the finish line. You are
Oh my
either on
goodness.
you're on level 2. It's not a train
Oh
smash.
my goodness. Okay.
You capture your score.
Okay, let me just okay. Yeah, because I'm now on 30 something scoring.
Okay, so you've got past the finish line. Okay, so I just want to mention, so it's possible that a number of people have gone past the finish line. I don't see any raised hands in the chat section, but I cannot just assume that no one has actually gone past the finish line. But it's very important for you to take a screenshot of that score of yours. Just in the interest of time, but I just want to verify, is there anyone online who has not finished yet? And I'm asking this because the testing for the game does indicate that it's about 10 to 15 minutes, which is what is required for that game. So this is nearly double that time. I just want to verify, is there anyone who's still playing or not, so that we can see if we can continue. Can speak now, or forever hold your peace. Okay, within the physical venue, are you fine if we then carry on?
Yeah.
So that's the first gameplay session. Now, I know this may have probably been weird if it's the first time you played a game in a session like this, if you were expecting just for it to be a demonstration. So what we'll do is now we'll go into an actual presentation about the fundamental aspects of data management planning. Now, I deliberately had the gameplay session before that presentation. Otherwise, it would have probably been futile to actually do the assessment afterwards. The idea is to actually see where are you in terms of your knowledge of data management planning. You go for the session, and then you play the game second time. And by then, your eyes should have been opened, and you might even be able to see exactly where you went wrong. But the score shows you that. If you are below the score of 10, then that's less than 50%, essentially. But if you're closer to the 20, score of 20, if you didn't go past the finish mark, then that means you did pretty well. So what I'll do now is, and you'll see that in the game, you are asked to actually go for, to get some kind of assistance regarding the creation of a data management plan. And I think the option that's given is either you get assistance from your researcher, you can go to the research office, or you can go to the library. And obviously, what I didn't mention previously is that the game has rigged questions in the sense that it's supposed to make you deliberately stumble. Simply because in real life, you don't always make the correct decision. You make good decisions, bad decisions, and some decisions in between. And the game tries to reflect that. So what I'll try to do now is sort of like have a simulation of a consultation with the librarian, assuming that you made the decision to go to the library. And the librarian is now shedding some insight into the fundamental aspects of data management planning. Now, for those of you who were actually here yesterday, you might actually get where we're coming from at the very beginning in terms of the first slide. But before you get into data management planning, the idea is to just have an understanding of what research data management is. And yesterday we defined it as planning for the manner in which research data will be managed during and after the research project. And secondly, controlling for the collection, processing, analysis, sharing, dissemination, curation, and reuse of that research data. Now, we did indicate that research data management is generally conceptualized in terms of a life cycle, and that data management planning is actually the very first step of this life cycle. So we will delve deeper into that very first step of the life cycle. Now, what exactly is data management planning? Data management planning can actually be defined as a process during which researchers describe the manner in which they plan to manage their research data during and after their research projects. It's important to note that the planning has to cover what happens before the project has commenced, as well as what happens after the project has come to an end. And in practice, data management planning should actually commence during the planning phase of a research project. So if you're going to apply for research funding, then you'd ideally want to look at creating a data management plan before you apply for such research funding. There are some funders who actually require the submission of data management plans. Not always the case, but if that is the case, then you would actually need to create the plan beforehand. So if you looked at the grant management life cycle, there's the pre-award and post-award phase. What happens is there'll be a data management plan that's created before funding is actually awarded. And if you're successful and you do receive funding, you would actually have to update the plan. Essentially, the plan gets updated until the project has actually come to an end. You can update the plan every 6 months, or at least that's what is recommended. Now, it's just a repetition of what I mentioned, that one should actually make sure that they actually create the plan before and after the pre-award phase. Now, having understood at least the process of data management planning, the next question is to actually define a data management plan. And the data management plan itself, which is what you create as part of this process, is an a priori description of how the data will be handled both during and after a research project. The plans are updated, as I indicated, throughout the research study, simply because things change. And at the end of a research project, what you have is a final data management plan, which will serve as a provenance record. It will describe what you did during the course of the research project. And incidentally enough, it actually serves as a form of data documentation. That's something that we described yesterday, so that if someone finds your research data, they can also find the data management plan, which will give them a good idea of how you as a researcher interacted with the data during your research project. Now, I have mentioned that data management plans are created and submitted to funders, especially those who require it, but there are funders who don't require this. But just as a matter of good data governance and data management principles, I would strongly recommend that researchers or postgraduate students actually create data management plans, even if their funders don't actually require it. What you'll find is that this enables you to actually manage your data better if you actually know what principles you should actually adhere to, even if it's not prescribed by a research funder, or even if it's not mandated by your institution or your research ethics committee. Now, to understand data management plans a bit better, it's worth noting that they are part of a broader ecosystem of documents. So these are actually documents that interact with various types of technologies. So about a decade ago, these were just plain text documents, but nowadays what you find are iterations of these documents that are known as machine actionable data management plans. The idea is that they are actually machine readable. And if you remember what I stated yesterday, is that the things that you create as part of research data management are not just supposed to be consumed by humans, but also by machines. So you have software that can actually parse through the data management plans. In certain cases, software can actually make recommendations, for instance, regarding which data repositories the data should eventually be submitted to once a project has come to an end. And not only that, but certain decisions, so the data can be read and certain decisions or actions can be made by the software, hence the term machine actionability in this case. The data management plans can be pushed from software known as data management planning software to other systems such as information management systems, as well as research data repositories. So the idea is that this is not a document that exists in isolation, but it should interact with various technological systems. Now, in terms of the structure of a data management plan, it does take on a certain form, and this is a recommended structure, which is known as the core requirements for data management plans. So if you were to examine a data management plan, ask what kind of information goes into this data management plan? It will include things such as a description of the manner in which the data will be collected or they will be reused if you're actually using the data, how the data will be documented, how you maintain the data's quality, how the data will be stored or backed up. Remember anything that we mentioned yesterday? I did mention a number of ways in which data can be backed up and stored, but we'll go into a bit more detail next week. You would also mention the legal implications or the laws that would actually apply to your research data. So are your research data subjected to data privacy laws? What are the possible intellectual property laws that apply to data? What about research contracts? Is there anything that's associated with your research data in that case? What about ethical clearance? Are you collecting data from human participants? Do you need to actually apply for ethical clearance? And as was noted yesterday, that these are the things that you would need to know before you apply for ethical clearance. So that's why you would actually need to have a data management plan beforehand. How will the data be shared? You should have an idea beforehand. So this is just briefly stated, but once you actually take your funding and you start the project, what you do is you start unpacking and developing your data management plan further. But that's the type of information that would be in the document, as well as who will be responsible for the data. Broadly speaking, these are actually covered by the core requirements for data management plans. Now, what you'll find is that I did mention that there are funders who require data management plans. And what they do is they try to assist researchers by providing them with templates that they can use to actually create these data management plans. And here's an example of software. The software in question here is DMP Online. And if you go to DMP Online, you can see that there are several funders that are listed there. The first one here is the AHRC Data Management Plan. The second one is the BBSRC template. So the actual funders are actually listed in the third column. So for the first one, that is Arts and Humanities Research Council. If you go to DMP Online, you'll be able to actually access that template for the data management plan. So you can go and have a look at various funders. If you're being funded by any of these funders, you'd go to DMP Online, and then you click on the template, and you'd have a ready-made template that you can use to generate your data management plan. DMP Online is actually based on European funders. It was developed in the UK by the DCC, Digital Curation Center, around 2010. But so as to not be outdone, the Americans decided to create one called DMP Tool. And unlike DMP Online, they decided to use the color blue instead of yellow. But if you look at this tool, what you'll find is that you have American funders that are actually listed here. But the principle is the same. If you're funded by any of the institutions here, you can simply go and acquire or at least retrieve a data management planning template that you can use to actually submit to the funder in question. So these templates are useful when the funder in question actually mandates that data management plans be created. But if it's a case where they do not, then you can't really make use of these templates. What you'll find is that your home institution may actually have its own templates that you can then rely on for such purposes. Now, when it comes to the creation of data management plans, they are actually created by using different types of data management planning software. And I'll show you some examples here. There's DMP Online, there's Easy DMP, there's DMP Tool, there's Data Stewardship Wizard, we have Argos, Fair Wizard, and finally RDMO. These are just a few examples of some data management plan software that actually exists, and people can actually use these software in order to actually generate data management plans. And that brings us to the resources. So at this university, if you want to find out some more about data management planning, you can go to the Research Data Management Library Guide that is hosted by the library, and there is a tab there for data management plans to get some more information about the creation of data management plans. The library itself does provide certain support services relating to research data management. So for instance, we have data stewardship services that include reviewing data management plans on behalf of researchers. There's data management and data curation, but in this case, the more relevant one is the review of data management plans. There are consultations that can be scheduled for librarians, focusing on data management planning, as well as related training sessions relating to data management planning. And that brings me to the end of that particular presentation. What I want to note is that having gone through the session, if you were to play that game a second time now, the same level, would you expect to see different results? Think you'd get the same results?
I kind of don't understand.
Oh,
I was just playing.
or you just select them? And after the presentation, still, it's not clear from your perspective.
It is better than before.
Than before.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is time to play the game, just 10 minutes to just play it again and then see whether your score actually does go up or whether it goes down in that sense. Obviously, for the more detailed aspect, the meatier aspects, we'll actually do that tomorrow because we'll actually then go into creating a data management plan using data management planning software. Sometimes the practical aspect actually makes things a bit clearer when you have to see what would this plan look like. The game won't necessarily give you that, but conceptually, it directs you in the right direction in terms of what kind of information could you put in the plan, who would actually be assisting you, especially if you're applying for funding, what kind of information would they require? But it obviously does not give you a generated DMP. That is one of the limitations. So I am willing to give the attendees at least just 10 minutes to dive into the game again, or do you feel like that you won't gain anything from that? Give it another go? 10 minutes? Okay. All right, everyone online, are you fine with that? We're going to go for another 10 minutes of a second gameplay session so you can actually see whether your results actually end up being any different. Hopefully they will improve on this particular occasion.
This game is to help you understand data management. Okay. Because the first level, if you get stuck somewhere, your score doesn't really go up.
Yes.
In that level. And then if you, because I did the game, but I didn't choose the first initial choices that I made, because I think the first ones were driven on my own research. Then the second trial, given that you had made key points of this is still data management, you're trying to identify this as a way of storing your data in research. Then I went that just as you said, then you seem to be breaking ceilings, if I'm making sense.
Yeah, it's sort of like, well, essentially, I won't go as far as saying that I spoon-fed you, but I gave you, but basically I gave you the fundamental aspects of data management planning. Having that kind of insight, it would be easier for you to actually play the game. But the game is supposed to be something that can be played ideally by a novice who has not necessarily been introduced to core aspects of RDM, but it is easier if you know the fundamentals. So for those who attended yesterday's session, had we just started off with the game, I think that people would have actually been lost.
Yeah.
And I only limited this to the first level because we actually haven't gone very far in terms of RDM. So if you come next week and you play the game, games levels of that deal with data storage, after you've attended the sessions on the management of sensitive data, you would actually perform far better. But it's supposed to be a teaching aid if there's no teacher who's actually there, but it's trial by fire. So by the virtue of the fact that your marks won't go up and accidents do happen in the game, but it's in a safe environment, you will actually take corrective action, hopefully until you go along the right path. Are you still good?
Yeah, I'm finished. Actually, the meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. You see?
This is the first time.
All right.
Yeah.
So it's working.
Yeah.
All right. So we're getting good feedback here in the venue, in the Extrata room, and I've seen comments that have actually been made in the chat section. We're doing part one, right? Yes, we are doing part one. In this case, Taravinga posted that it's done with, or he or she is done with 18 points. Electra is done 10 out of 10, although it should be out of 20, I hope. Yes, and you did ask, Electra asked whether it's for part one, but either way should be 100%, although the score should be out of 20 from what I've seen. And there's a comment from Electra indicating that our understanding is better. And we're just having that discussion here in the Extrata room about the purposes of the game and whether or not your score would actually be bound to go up. I think naturally it's bound to go up. I would be very surprised if anyone's marks were to actually decline. And the thing is, if you go for consultation in real life with the librarian, they should at least give you some information that should help you with managing your research data, like in this particular case. So is everyone done so far, or people still playing? Can we just have some kind of indication by show of hands in the chat section? Are we still good here? Is that everyone is pretty much finished? Can I see from a show of hands from the online attendees, since I simply can't see you, if you could just raise your hands, your virtual hands, just to indicate that you're actually done. Okay, there's one person. I do know that I think Electra is done, and this Taravinga already indicated that he or she is done. We'll just wait for 2 more minutes for the rest to finish up. So what I can state now is that I'm totally can post that information. There's a link that is going to be posted online, so that you can actually complete the summative assessment. There are only 2 questions that you basically need to answer. The first question is, what was the score for your first gameplay session? And the second one would be, what was the score for your second session? So we actually want to see the difference in the marks. Did the marks actually go up or did they go down? And obviously you have to fill in your biographical details as well. But really we just want to see that score and whether or not the game makes a difference, or even if there's a difference that is made by the intervention, in this case, that is the librarian. So the idea is, if you need assistance with data management planning at the institution, ideally at this university, you should come to the library. You can obviously go to a researcher or the research office, but the most useful information you're about to get would come from the library. That is insofar as it relates to data management planning. Okay, so 2 minutes up. Octavia has already shared that link, so a link has shared in the chat group. For those who are present, how will they do the classes? Emailed. All right. For everyone who's present, this will be emailed to you. What I want to, so I want to give people at least some time to just to fill in that information. So about 5 minutes or so. It should take you less than 5 minutes just to complete that questionnaire. Yeah, I see that there's a comment that has been made in the chat by Silo. So you can capture the score by using that link that was just shared by Tobia. If you just click that, you'll be able to enter details, and then you just add the score for the first gameplay session, and then for the second attempt as well. And then we'll be able to see the aggregate scores from our side. Okay, so we've got 1 more minute left basically for the data capturing process to be completed. Okay, so it's now 22, and I'll presume that people are actually now then capturing that data. The link is still there. I think it can be shared even after the session by Tobito. Will just obviously depend on you having actually being able to remember what the scores were for both of those gameplay sessions. So in wrapping up, before we conclude, I just want to see if there are any reflections on the game, learning experiences that anyone would like to share. Anything anyone would like to share from on? Let me give the online audience an opportunity first. Any reflections? Any comments that you'd like to share with the rest of your colleagues or fellow attendees? Opportunities going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, anything from the attendees here in person? Anything you'd want to share? Not compulsory, by the way, but I do want to actually let the floor is open. All right. If there's nothing further, then we can bring this session to an end. What I want to point out is that tomorrow there'll be part 2 of the data management planning session. And in that case, that will involve a bit of a deeper dive into different aspects of data management planning. And I'll actually introduce you to the software, or at least an example of the software that you can use for data management planning session. So it will actually have a practical demonstration. There's no guarantee that it will be interactive. If we can get everyone on board and everyone can at least sign in, that we can have a shared data management plan, and that would actually allow you to actually create a data management plan during tomorrow's session, but it all depends on the attributes of the tool in question. The university itself does not have its own data management plan and software, so we'll actually just be using freely available alternative. And it might not be possible for all of us to actually work on a joint data management plan. So we'll see what actually happens tomorrow. If we can't do it jointly, then it'll just be a matter of you watching as I go through a data management plan. So I thank you, all of you, for attending this session. Thank you so much for the feedback. Bukiri has stated that this was a great session, that he or she learned so much in this case. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you all for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.